The snow fell heavy that December morning at Fort Walker, a military base nestled in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. Major Sarah Chin stood in the briefing room, her uniform pressed sharp, her dark eyes fixed on the map before her. Snow rescue operations. Winter survival protocol. These were things she had trained for her entire career. 23 years in the United States Army. 23 years of proving herself, day after day, moment after moment. Major Chen, Colonel Marcus Wright said, not even looking up from his clipboard. You'll take a vehicle and check on the Riverside Station outpost. It's remote, yes, but it's a simple task. Supply check. Make sure the backup generators are working. In and out. Sarah nodded. Simple. Everything was simple when they gave it to her. The dangerous assignments, the unpopular decisions, the jobs nobody else wanted. That was Sarah's specialty. Not because she was the best. But because she was a woman in a man's world, and somehow, people thought that made her expendable. I'm taking the team, she said quietly. Thompson, Rodriguez, and my 3 military working dogs. They need the training in heavy snow conditions. Colonel Wright finally looked up. His gray eyes showed what Sarah had seen 1,000 times before. Doubt. Major, those dogs are valuable assets. And taking unnecessary personnel. They're not unnecessary, Sarah interrupted, keeping her voice level and professional. Snow conditions are worsening. Protocol requires a team of at least 3 for mountain operations. And the dogs are trained search and rescue. This is exactly what they're for. Major Tom Harrison, who stood near the window, let out a small snort that he tried to hide with a cough. Sarah's jaw tightened. She knew what Harrison thought of her. She heard the talk in the break room, the casual remarks about women in command positions, about how she was too cautious, too careful, too emotional about things. Last month, she had ordered her team to shelter in place during a dangerous operation rather than push forward in fog. They had all made it home safe. Harrison had said it was a waste of resources. Sarah had said it was protocol. Fine, Colonel Wright said, returning his attention to his papers. But keep it brief. A blizzard is moving in fast. Report by radio every 30 minutes. And Major Chen. Don't make this complicated. Don't make this complicated. As if heroic rescues and careful decision-making were complicated simply because she made them. Sarah left the briefing room and made her way to the kennel. The winter wind cut through the open pathways of the base. She could feel the storm coming. 23 years in the military taught you to read weather like a book. This wasn't going to be a normal snowstorm. This was going to be fierce. In the kennel, her 3 military working dogs waited. Ranger, a German shepherd with a black and tan coat, was the oldest at 7 years. Rex, a Belgian Malinois with intense amber eyes, was the strongest and fastest. And then there was Duke, a 3-year-old German shepherd who was still learning but had the heart of a warrior twice his age. These dogs were her family. She had trained each one herself, worked alongside them on operations, and trusted them with her life. Hey, boys, she said, running her hands over their heads. They pushed against her legs, tails wagging, sensing something in her energy. We're going for a ride. Sarah had grown up around dogs. Her parents owned a farm in rural Oregon, and she had learned early that animals could teach you things humans never could. They taught you about loyalty that asked nothing in return. They taught you about courage that didn't need recognition. They taught you that strength wasn't about being loud. It was about being steady. That's who Sarah was. Steady. Strong. Quiet. An hour later, Sarah's vehicle, a heavy-duty army truck designed for mountain terrain, pulled out of Fort Walker. Thompson sat in the passenger seat, a young sergeant with eager eyes and something to prove. Rodriguez drove the second truck with supplies and backup equipment. And in the back of Sarah's truck, secured safely with harnesses and ventilation, the three dogs waited with the patience of soldiers who understood their job. The road climbed higher into the mountains. Pine trees stood like sentinels on either side, their branches already heavy with snow. The sky had turned a peculiar shade of gray that meant the weather was about to turn serious. Sarah's hands tightened on the radio. She called in their position every 30 minutes, just as ordered. Each time, Colonel Wright's voice came back with fewer words, less patience. "Just get it done, Chen," he said the last time. "We're closing the gate soon. Don't get stuck out there." Sarah drove carefully, expertly. She knew these mountain roads. She had trained for winter operations. She had learned from the best mountain rescue specialists in the military. And still, she could feel something shifting in the weather around her. The wind was picking up. The snow was falling faster. When they reached Riverside Station, it was already the middle of the afternoon. The small military outpost sat alone on a ridge, surrounded by nothing but wilderness in every direction. It was meant to serve as an early warning station for weather and potential threats. For most of the year, it was staffed by only 2 soldiers. But in December, they reduced it to caretaker status. Supplies delivered once a month. Communication maintained by radio. Sarah and Thompson quickly moved through the station, checking the generators, noting the fuel levels, ensuring everything was secure and functional. Everything was fine. Rodriguez waited outside, keeping an eye on the weather and the dogs. "We should head back," Thompson said, looking out the window. "That storm is moving fast." Sarah checked her watch. 28 minutes until full darkness. The drive back would take 40 minutes in good conditions. These were not good conditions. She reached for the radio. "Fort Walker, this is Major Chen. The station is secure. All systems green. We're beginning our return trip now. Static." "Then, copy that, Major. Weather alert just went out. Conditions are deteriorating rapidly. Travel safe." Sarah nodded to Thompson. They gathered their gear and headed back to the trucks. As they stepped outside, the wind nearly knocked Thompson sideways. Sarah felt the temperature drop. The snow was falling so thick now that she could barely see the trees 10 feet away. This was no longer a simple supply run. This had become a survival situation. Sarah made a quick decision. They couldn't make it back to the base. Not in this. The mountain pass would be completely white soon. No visibility. The roads would become invisible. One wrong turn and they would go over the edge into a ravine. One stop to help someone and they would freeze. "We're sheltering here," she said firmly. "Rodriguez, get the supplies from your truck. Thompson, help me get the dogs inside. We're staying the night." "But the base," Thompson started. "We'll understand protocol," Sarah finished. "When a blizzard moves in faster than forecast, you shelter in place. That's what we're doing." Rodriguez appeared through the snow, already moving with purpose. These men knew Sarah well enough to trust her judgment. She had kept them alive through worse situations. And her dogs, those loyal soldiers she had brought with her, had warm coats and steady nerves. As night fell and the blizzard raged outside with the fury of a living thing, Sarah settled the 3 dogs in the station's warm interior. She rationed the supplies, checked the radio constantly, and made entries in the log. Thompson and Rodriguez stood watch. Sarah didn't know it yet, but on a base 2 hours away, a Navy SEAL named Marcus Stone was getting a call from his commanding officer. A team was overdue. And a certain Major Chen, who had been underestimated her entire career, was about to show the military what she was really made of. The blizzard howled through the night. Sarah sat awake, her hand on Ranger's head, and waited for dawn. Morning came, but it brought no relief. If anything, the blizzard was worse. The snow had piled against the windows of the Riverside Station so high that they could barely see out. The thermometer on the wall inside read 19 degrees. Outside, the wind chill was probably dropping to dangerous levels. Sarah had lived through harsh winters her entire life, but this storm was something different. This was a once-in-a-decade event. She made coffee on the camp stove and divided the supplies carefully. 3 men. 3 military dogs. Food for maybe 3 days if they rationed properly. Fuel for heat. Water from melting snow. They could survive this. She had trained for scenarios exactly like this. What Sarah didn't know was that back at Fort Walker, chaos was unfolding. When Sarah had not reported her position at 0800 hours, the base took notice. When she didn't check in at 0900, Colonel Wright became concerned. By 10 o'clock, he had sent out a search team in an Army helicopter. But the helicopter could see nothing through the white. The storm was too thick, too unpredictable. They had turned back, unable to locate her. By 11 o'clock, the decision had been made to call in outside help. 3 hours away, at Naval Base Coronado in San Diego, Navy SEAL Team 4 was preparing for a winter training exercise in the mountains. Marcus Stone was a 13-year veteran of the SEAL teams. He had served in 6 different countries, completed 73 dangerous operations, and received commendations that filled his personnel file. But more importantly, he had something that set him apart from most of his brothers in arms. Marcus had a gift for finding people. When people got lost in mountains, in wilderness, in impossible situations, Marcus Stone was the one they called. He had a search and rescue dog named Ranger, another Ranger, though this one was a chocolate Labrador with a nose so sensitive he could track a person 3 days after a rainstorm. Marcus and his Ranger had found 34 missing people in the last 5 years. They had brought them all home. When Marcus's commanding officer called him into the office that morning, Marcus already knew something had gone wrong. His shoulders tightened. Ranger, who waited outside the office, would have sensed the change in his handler's energy. Ranger could always tell when work was coming. "We have a missing team," the commanding officer said without preamble. Fort Walker. A Major Sarah Chen, 2 subordinate officers, and 3 military working dogs were on a supply run to a mountain station. Blizzard moved in faster than forecast. They're overdue and not responding to standard check-in protocol. Weather is preventing search operations. Marcus's mind already worked through the details. Mountains. Blizzard. Military personnel trained in survival. "They'll shelter in place," he said. "Where's the last known location?" "A remote outpost. Riverside Station, about 2,000 feet elevation. The road to get there is only passable in good weather." "I need my gear," Marcus said, standing up. "And my dog. How soon can we move?" "Immediately. There's a C-130 waiting for you on the runway. You'll land as close as we can get you. Army ground support will meet you there." 20 minutes later, Marcus Stone and his Ranger were in the air, heading north toward the Sierra Nevada mountains. Marcus was a man of few words. He didn't waste energy on worry. Instead, he reviewed what he knew. A female major with 20-plus years of service. 2 junior officers. 3 military working dogs. These were trained soldiers. They would know what to do. They would find shelter. They would wait for rescue. But there were variables he couldn't control. The temperature. The duration of the storm. The resources available at their location. Whether Major Chen was the kind of leader who would take calculated risks or dangerous chances. As it turned out, he would soon discover that Major Sarah Chen was exactly the kind of leader who did neither. She was the kind who thought about every person under her command, and every animal in her care, and made decisions that nobody else was willing to make because she understood that sometimes, there was no perfect choice. Only the one that kept the most people alive. Back at Riverside Station, the morning of the second day brought a new crisis. The fuel supply that Sarah had calculated to last 3 days was burning faster than expected. The cold was so intense that the backup generators were consuming fuel at a rate she hadn't anticipated. If the storm lasted more than 2 days, they would run out of heat. Sarah stood in the main room of the station, looking at the gauge on the fuel tank. She didn't show her worry to Thompson and Rodriguez. She had learned long ago that soldiers look to their commanding officer to understand what is possible and what is not. If the commanding officer looks afraid, everyone becomes afraid. If the commanding officer looks steady, everyone becomes steady. "We're going to rotate the generators," she said calmly. "Primary generator runs for 4 hours, then we switch to backup and let the primary rest. It'll stretch the fuel longer. We'll maintain minimum heat in the living area and let the other rooms get cold." "What about the dogs?" Rodriguez asked. He was a good man, Rodriguez. He came from a big family, 5 sisters, and he had a natural tenderness around living creatures. "The dogs stay with us," Sarah said. "In the main room. Dogs generate heat. They'll help. And we'll make sure they're eating enough calories to maintain their body temperature." Thompson, the younger soldier, frowned. "The base is going to send a rescue team, right? I mean, they know we're here." "They know," Sarah agreed. "And they're trying. But rescue operations in this weather are dangerous. I'd rather we shelter here safely than have another team risk their lives trying to reach us in a blizzard." What Sarah didn't say out loud was this: in her 23 years of military service, she had learned that rescue operations were usually complicated by impatience. By the desire to act fast. By the pressure to do something, anything, rather than wait. And waiting, while harder psychologically, was often the wiser choice. She had never been rewarded for that kind of thinking. But she did it anyway. That afternoon, Sarah rationed their meals carefully. 1 warm meal and 2 cold meals. She melted snow for water. She made sure the dogs had enough to eat. Ranger, being the oldest, required careful monitoring. But all 3 dogs were soldiers, just like Thompson and Rodriguez. They understood their mission and they did their job without complaint. Sarah sat with each dog in turn, running her hands over them, checking their health, their spirits. These animals were her responsibility. They had trusted her to lead them, and she had brought them into a blizzard. If they didn't make it out, that was on her. She owned that completely. That evening, Rodriguez was checking the radio when he picked up a transmission. "Fort Walker, this is Navy SEAL Team 4. We are en route to Riverside Station. ETA 4 hours. Conditions are rough, but we're making time. Stand by for further updates." Thompson's face lit up. "They're sending SEALs." Sarah felt something shift in her chest. Relief, yes. But also something else. A complicated feeling that she couldn't quite name. The next 4 hours stretched like pulled taffy. Sarah kept the station warm, kept the dogs calm, kept her team ready. The wind outside seemed to scream with increasing fury. The snow fell so thickly that even the radio was breaking up with static. Then, finally, a new voice came through the static. "Riverside Station, this is SEAL Team 4. We are approaching your location on foot. The road is impassable, so we're coming cross-country. Stand by." Sarah's hands tightened. Cross-country. That meant abandoning the safety of vehicles. That meant hiking through a blizzard. That meant risking lives to reach them. "Fort Walker, relay to SEAL Team, you are not authorized for high-risk approach in these conditions," Sarah transmitted back immediately. "We are secure. We have shelter. We have supplies. Repeat, we are secure. Stand down and wait for weather window." Static. Then a different voice, older and calmer. "Major Chen, this is Commander Marcus Stone, SEAL Team 4. Understood. We're not going to risk additional lives. We found shelter about 500 meters from your position. We're settling here for the night. We'll move in with the morning light. Sarah closed her eyes. A Navy SEAL commander named Marcus Stone. She didn't know him. She had never heard of him. But his voice had something in it that she recognized. It was the voice of someone who understood what she had learned, that being brave sometimes meant waiting. Being strong sometimes meant knowing when not to act. That night, as the blizzard continued to howl outside, Sarah lay awake on a cot in the main room of the station. Her 3 dogs lay around her like a living blanket, keeping her warm, keeping her company. Thompson and Rodriguez slept on the other side of the room. And somewhere in the darkness, 500 meters away, a Navy SEAL named Marcus Stone kept vigil with his chocolate Labrador, waiting for morning so he could meet the woman everyone at the base had underestimated for her entire career. Neither of them knew yet that this rescue was about to uncover a much deeper truth. And neither of them knew that by morning, everything about Sarah's career and her reputation at Fort Walker was about to change forever. Dawn came gray and tired. The storm had not weakened, but it had changed. The wind was less fierce. The snow fell more gently. Sarah could see maybe 50 meters now instead of nothing at all. That would be enough. She had the team ready. Supplies packed. Dogs' harnesses checked. Radio batteries fresh. Everything military, prepared, organized, by the book. When she heard the knock on the door, she was almost surprised to find it real. Not imagined. Not a hallucination brought on by the cold and the stress. She opened the door. Marcus Stone stood there like something out of a different world. Tall, broad-shouldered, with winter camouflage covered in snow and ice. His eyes were a piercing blue, and they assessed the situation instantly. Behind him, 2 other SEAL team members secured a perimeter. And at Marcus's side stood the chocolate Labrador, Ranger, with a harness and a rope attached. Major Chen. Marcus said, and his voice was the same calm voice from the radio. Commander Stone, Sarah answered. She stepped aside. Come in. Get warm. The next hour was a carefully choreographed operation. Marcus's team had planned the evacuation route. The SEALs had supplies, better cold weather gear, and most importantly, they had rope and knowledge of winter rescue techniques. Marcus himself took a long look at Sarah's 3 dogs. These are good animals, he said simply. The best, Sarah replied. Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, maybe. The understanding of people who had devoted their lives to the service of others, whether human or animal. Marcus had seen it before, what happened when someone loved the beings under their care more than they loved themselves. The walk out of the mountains took 6 hours. It was brutal and cold and required a level of focus that left no room for thought. Sarah and her team moved alongside Marcus's SEALs, roped together for safety. The dogs walked with them, trained soldiers moving with their people. At one point, when Thompson slipped on ice and nearly fell, Marcus was there, steady and strong, pulling him upright without comment or judgment. When they finally reached the army vehicles waiting at the lower elevation, everyone was exhausted and frozen, but alive. Every single person. Every single dog. The ride back to Fort Walker was quiet. Sarah sat in the warm truck, watching the snow fall more gently now that they were at lower elevation. Marcus sat beside her. He didn't say much, but his presence was steady and calming. You kept them calm, he said finally. They're good soldiers, Sarah replied. And they trusted me. Marcus nodded. That's rare. When they arrived at Fort Walker, the base erupted. Vehicles swarmed them. Medical personnel stood ready. And Colonel Wright appeared, relief and something else written on his face. Sarah stepped out of the truck, and Marcus appeared beside her. Together, they helped Thompson and Rodriguez down. And then, one by one, they brought the 3 military working dogs into the warm safety of the base. That's when everything changed. Later that evening, after medical checks and warm meals and a reunion of the dogs with the veterinary staff, Sarah was called to the commander's office. She expected a commendation. She expected gratitude. She had brought her team home safe. She had made good decisions under pressure. What she found instead was Colonel Wright standing with his arms crossed, looking angry. "Major Chen," he said coldly. "You disobeyed direct orders." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Sir. You were told to check supplies and return. Instead, you made an unauthorized decision to shelter in place. You took 3 valuable military dogs into a high-risk situation. You cost this base a rescue operation by Navy SEALs. Do you understand the financial and operational impact of what you did?" Sarah felt her face go hot. "Sir, the blizzard moved in faster than forecast. Protocol dictates shelter in place when weather conditions become too dangerous for travel." "I know what protocol says," Colonel Wright interrupted. "Protocol also says you report to your commanding officer before making those decisions. You don't make them on your own. You don't decide what's right without asking. That's not bravery, Major Chen. That's insubordination." Sarah's jaw clenched. She wanted to speak. She wanted to say that asking him would have cost them the window to find safe shelter. That protocol was a guide, not a law, and good officers adapted to circumstances. She wanted to say so many things. But before she could, the door opened. Marcus Stone walked in. He was still in his cold weather gear, his ranger waiting somewhere warm. "Sir," he said to Colonel Wright, with the respectful tone of an officer addressing superior rank. "I need to report something." "Commander Stone," Colonel Wright said, straightening. "This is a base matter. It's not your concern." "Actually, sir, it is my concern," Marcus said calmly. "Because I've just reviewed the base communications log with your operations officer. And I've confirmed something I suspected." He pulled out a printed sheet of radio transmissions. "Major Chen," Marcus continued, turning to face her, "was the only officer in that operation following protocol. When the blizzard moved in too fast to return safely, she made the decision to shelter in place. She radioed base and reported it. She did everything by the book." Marcus turned back to Colonel Wright. "The issue, sir, is that her radio call was received. I saw it logged at 1,432 hours. We are sheltering in place at Riverside Station. Clear and professional. She was not ignored. She was not disobeyed." He flipped through the transmission log. "What happened," Marcus said, "is that between the time Major Chen transmitted that message and the time her next check-in was due, Major Tom Harrison was in the communications center. And he failed to log the message properly. When her next radio check-in didn't come through, because she was maintaining her position, as she was supposed to, he reported her missing without ever mentioning that she had informed base of her location." The room went very quiet. "Additionally," Marcus continued, his voice steady and clear, "I reviewed the decision to send my team into a dangerous rescue operation. We were authorized to proceed, which was the right call. But the authorization was given based on incomplete information. Major Chen was not actually missing. She was exactly where she said she was, doing exactly what protocol required her to do." Sarah felt something break open in her chest. 23 years. 23 years of being doubted, questioned, underestimated. And the one time she had done everything right, the one time she had followed every rule and made every correct decision, she had been blamed for the very situation she had managed perfectly. Colonel Wright's face was turning red. "If this is true." "It's true," Marcus said. "I have a team of officers who can verify every word. I have the communication logs. And I have a recommendation: Major Chen should be formally recognized for her exceptional command decisions under extreme pressure. And Major Harrison should face investigation for communications failure and misreporting of a missing person, both of which are serious violations." Sarah looked at Marcus, and she saw something in his eyes that she recognized completely. It was the look of someone who had spent his career fighting for what was right, even when it was complicated, even when it was difficult. Even when it meant challenging a superior officer. "Commander Stone," Colonel Wright said, his voice tight, "I appreciate your input, but this is Army business. We handle our own investigations." "I understand, sir," Marcus replied. "But I want to be clear about one thing. I am going to report this incident to my commanding officer at Naval Base Coronado. Major Chen's actions directly enabled my team's rescue operation to succeed. She maintained discipline and order under extreme conditions. She protected lives, including the lives of animals under her care. That's the kind of officer the military needs." Marcus turned to Sarah. "You did good work out there, Major. Your team is alive because of your leadership." He walked out of the office. Sarah stood very still. She didn't speak. She didn't know what to say. She had spent so long being strong, being steady, being professional, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone stand up and say what she had always known, that she was good at her job. "Major Chen," Colonel Wright said finally, his voice subdued. "I'll be looking into this matter personally. You're dismissed." Sarah saluted and left the office. As she walked down the hallway, she allowed herself one small breath. One small moment of letting it out. The anger, the frustration, the weight of years of being doubted. But more than that, there was something else. Hope. Because sometimes, justice came from unexpected places. Sometimes, it came from a Navy SEAL commander with kind eyes and a chocolate Labrador who understood that good leadership meant standing up for people when they couldn't stand up for themselves. The investigation into Major Tom Harrison took 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, Sarah went about her duties as normal. She worked with her dogs. She filed reports. She attended meetings. But everything felt different now. People looked at her differently. Some with shame, because they had doubted her. Some with a new kind of respect. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus Stone had kept his promise. He had reported the incident to his commanding officer, and the military's informal network, that whisper system that moved information faster than official channels, had spread the story. A female major who made smart decisions while everyone else panicked. A Navy SEAL commander who had backed her up publicly. Harrison had also kept his promise. He had submitted multiple communications logs from that blizzard day. At first, his story stayed consistent. He claimed he had passed along Major Chen's radio transmission about sheltering in place. He claimed there was a miscommunication in how it was received at base. But the communications officer, a sergeant named Michelle Waters, knew the truth. She had been working that day. She had seen Harrison come into the communications center. She had watched him mark a transmission from Major Chen as routine check-in, acknowledge. And then she had watched him make no notation of the critical message about sheltering in place. When the investigation committee called her to testify, Michelle Waters almost didn't do it. She was afraid. Harrison was a senior officer. He had friends. Making an accusation like this could damage her career. But she thought about Major Chen. About a woman who had led her team safely through a blizzard. About a woman who had trusted her judgment and acted with integrity, and then been blamed for doing everything right. Michelle Waters told the truth. The investigation found that Harrison had deliberately failed to log Major Chen's position notification. The reasons were complex and painful. Harrison had been passed over for promotion twice. He was bitter about his position in the military. And Major Chen, a woman, was rising in rank and respect. Something about her success had made him angry enough to sabotage her. It was a form of revenge. A way to prove that women couldn't handle difficult situations. A way to pull her down. When the investigation report was finalized, Harrison was removed from his position pending a court-martial. His military career was effectively over. And Sarah was formally recognized for her exceptional leadership and decision-making under extreme conditions. She received a commendation. Her file was officially noted with the truth of what had happened. It should have felt like victory. But when Sarah read the investigation report, sitting alone in her office, she felt mostly sad. Not because she hadn't been vindicated, that mattered, yes. But because it had taken an external force, a Navy SEAL, a person from outside the system, to make the truth come out. How many times had this happened to other officers? How many times had the truth been buried because nobody was brave enough to dig it out? That's when she received the letter. It was handwritten, on simple paper. The envelope just said, Major Chen, on the front. Inside, in neat military handwriting, was a message from Marcus Stone. Major Chen. I wanted to reach out and check on you personally. I know the investigation was difficult. I know this vindication comes late and in painful ways. But I want you to know something. In my 13 years as a SEAL, I've learned that real leadership is not something that comes from rank or position. It comes from the choices you make when nobody is watching. When you had the option to push your team back down that mountain in the dark, knowing the risks, to save yourself the paperwork and the inconvenience of a rescue operation, you didn't do it. Instead, you sheltered them. You kept them safe. You made decisions that put their lives first. That kind of integrity is rare. And it's exactly why women like you are so important in the military. Because you understand something that a lot of us take too long to learn: leadership is a responsibility, not a privilege. If you're ever in San Diego, my team and I would be honored to train with you and your dogs. We could all learn from the way you handle those animals. The respect. The care. The consistency. Respectfully. Commander Marcus Stone. P.S. Ranger, my dog, has been asking about Ranger, your dog. I think they bonded during the rescue. If you want to arrange a play date, I can probably make time. Sarah read the letter 3 times. She sat at her desk in the quiet of her office, with her 3 dogs asleep on the floor beside her, and she read Marcus's words over and over. She had spent so long being strong for other people. Being steady. Being professional. Never showing doubt or fear or hurt. And in doing those things, she had found herself isolated, questioned, blamed for succeeding too well and standing too tall. But Marcus Stone had seen her. He had seen what she was doing, understood it, and respected it. Not patronized her. Not blamed her. Respected her. Sarah made a decision right then. She picked up the phone and called Naval Base Coronado. It took 3 transfers and some patient explaining, but she finally reached Commander Stone's office. This is Major Chen, she told his assistant. Fort Walker Army Base. I'd like to respond to the commander's letter. When Marcus got the call, he was in a training session with his team. He excused himself and took it in his office. Major Chen, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I'm glad you called. I wanted to thank you, Sarah said. For everything. For believing in me. For standing up when it would have been easier not to. That's what we do, Marcus said simply. We stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. And sometimes, we stand up for people who can stand up for themselves, but shouldn't have to do it alone. There was a pause. Then Sarah said, about that play date for the dogs. I'm going to be in San Diego next month for a training conference. Maybe we could arrange something. I'd like that, Marcus said. Very much. 6 months later, Sarah stood on a beach near San Diego. The Pacific Ocean spread out before her, vast and blue and infinite. She wasn't alone. Thompson and Rodriguez were there. Michelle Waters, the communications sergeant who had told the truth, was there with her wife. And Marcus Stone stood beside her, with his chocolate Labrador, Ranger. The occasion was a joint training exercise between Navy SEAL Team 4 and a specialized Army unit that Sarah had been asked to lead. Not asked to assist with. Not brought in to do paperwork or planning. Asked to lead. When the orders came down from Colonel Wright's superiors, asking Sarah to head up the new training program, the colonel had delivered the message himself. He had looked uncomfortable. He had offered an apology, though not quite one, more like an acknowledgement. But Sarah had accepted it with grace. Because she understood something now. Some people came around because they learned. And some people never did. Either way, your job was to do your job well and not waste energy on bitterness. The training exercise that day involved search and rescue in difficult terrain. Both teams working together. Both sets of dogs, Sarah's 3 military working dogs and Marcus's ranger, working alongside soldiers who had learned to trust them completely. Sarah watched as her ranger worked with one of the SEAL recruits. The dog moved through the underbrush with purpose and intelligence. The young man followed, trusting the animal completely. That trust, Sarah had learned, was everything. It was what made the difference between a team and a group of people standing near each other. Later that evening, after the training was complete and the teams had gathered at the beach house provided for the joint exercise, Sarah and Marcus stood apart from the others, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red and purple. "You did well today," Marcus said. "Your people work better with our people than they should on the first day." "They're good soldiers," Sarah replied. "And they follow a leader they trust. That makes all the difference." Marcus nodded. "It does." They stood in silence for a moment. "I've been thinking about something," Marcus said finally. "The military has a shortage of specialized personnel in search and rescue operations. Particularly people who understand both the command structure and the actual work on the ground. I'm going to be recommending you for a position with a joint task force. It would involve regular interaction with Navy teams, but you'd maintain your Army rank and position." Sarah turned to look at him. "Why are you telling me this before it's official?" "Because I wanted you to know it was coming," Marcus said. "And because I wanted you to have the option to decide if it's something you want. I'm not trying to save you or rescue you. I'm trying to give you information so you can make the choice that's right for you." Sarah felt something settle in her chest. This man had been her advocate, yes. But he had never tried to control her or make decisions for her. He had simply stood beside her and told the truth. "I'll consider it," she said. "But I want to choose based on what's best for my team, not just what's best for me." "That's why you're an officer," Marcus said, "and Harrison never will be again." Over the next 3 years, Sarah did take the Joint Task Force position. She worked alongside Marcus's team regularly. They conducted training exercises, executed rescue operations, and built a reputation for being the most effective search and rescue unit in the military. But more than that, something personal had grown between Sarah and Marcus. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that interfered with their work. But a respect that had deepened into friendship, and a friendship that had deepened into something more. They had realized that leadership wasn't about needing to be rescued. It was about finding someone who understood the weight of responsibility and could share it. By the time Sarah was promoted to colonel, a promotion that came from her commanding officers, not from outside pressure, but from her consistent excellence, she and Marcus were already talking about a future beyond the military. On a clear morning in October, 5 years after the blizzard, Colonel Sarah Chin stood at the same beach near San Diego. This time, she wasn't in uniform. And beside her, Marcus Stone stood without his Navy uniform as well. Both had decided to retire from active duty and move into advisory positions instead. At the beach house, their dogs played together. Sarah's ranger, now 10 years old, ran with less energy but more wisdom. Marcus's ranger, also aging gracefully, matched his pace. And their younger dogs played in the surf. When Marcus kissed her, it was the same way he did everything, steady and sure and completely present. "Ready for the next mission?" he asked, because that's who they were. They were people who understood that life was a series of missions, and the best missions were the ones you chose together. "Always," Sarah said. And somewhere in the military hierarchy, a commendation still hung in files noting the bravery of a female officer who made the right decisions while everyone else doubted her. A note about how integrity and leadership didn't look the way people expected them to look. How sometimes, the strongest person in the room was the one willing to wait, to listen, to make decisions based on protection rather than ego. Major Tom Harrison's name appeared in those same files, but for different reasons. As a cautionary tale. As a reminder of what happened when bitterness and resentment were allowed to fuel your decisions. And Commander Marcus Stone's name appeared there too, in the commendations of a female officer he believed in. As a reminder that sometimes, the bravest thing a leader could do was stand beside someone else and say, "She was right all along." The blizzard that had brought them together was long past. But the clarity it had created, about who Sarah was, about what she valued, about what real leadership meant, that stayed with her forever. As she watched the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, with Marcus beside her and the dogs running freely in the sand, Sarah Chin understood something fundamental about strength. It wasn't about never needing help. It was about accepting help when it came from someone who understood that helping didn't mean taking over. It meant standing beside you and making sure the truth was told. And sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was let someone see that you were strong enough to accept support. The waves rolled in, endless and eternal, and Sarah felt more at peace than she ever had in her 28 years of military service.